I hated our wedding day. Sorry for the long post, it's definitely a long story. My husband, 25M, and I, 27F, got married in the beginning of September. It was supposed to be a beautiful small wedding greater than 40 people. We planned it all in under 3 months, and while it was mostly going to be DIY, everything seemed to come together as the date got closer. Here is where a little backstory is necessary. For several childhood traumatic reasons, I had cut contact with my mother for a few years now. My mental health had flourished and I was in a much better place. I was happy. I have 2 younger sisters, 19 and 17, that I was finally getting to know now that they were older. I was so happy about this that my husband brought up the fact that maybe I would regret it if my mother wasn't there to see me get married. After much deliberating, I called her for the first time in at least 2 years to invite her to the wedding. I can't describe the tone of her voice as she tentatively asked me if I had actually meant to call her and not a butt dial. In that moment so much of my reservations about having her in my life went away. I missed my mom, I wanted to have my mom. I thought, hey, things are different now, I am in control. I get to decide the impact people have in my life. A couple of weeks go by, and my mother asks me what I'm doing for the food. I told her I hadn't picked a place yet but had gotten some quotes and that everything was so expensive. She then offered to take care of the food. She knew a guy that made trip tip and hired him for my sister's high school graduation party. At this point I realized that she looked at this wedding as a way of reconciling our relationship, and honestly, I wanted that too. I talked to my fiancé and he wasn't very thrilled about the idea. I was a little upset by this and told him how it was a wonderful opportunity as we could now allocate that money towards our honeymoon fund. He just asked me if I was sure I could count on her, as she had let me down in the past. I told him how this time it was different. Fast forward, 2 weeks before the wedding, and I reminded her about this super important rehearsal dinner my in-laws have planned the day before the wedding. My in-laws live 5 hours away from us, 7 hours from my mother, so they had not had a chance to meet each other before. This was very important to me as my in-laws and I had a wonderful relationship. I had come to see my mother-in-law as my own mother. I loved her and their opinion meant so much to me. Anyways, my sisters came to help me with the wedding a week before. We're DIYing and everything is great until we all get sick. All production comes to a snail pace as we're struggling to feel better and the house is a complete mess. We are still sick but leave for the wedding Friday. It is in the town my in-laws live in. Absolutely beautiful redwoods. Wedding is on Sunday. My mother was supposed to be there by 2 on Saturday and make sure all the food stuff was ready for the next day. We had talked about the food as I was a bit hesitant because she was going to pick up the meat that Saturday, but she assured me she made sure everything be great. Anyways, that Saturday we get to the Airbnb, and make sure everything is delivered. My husband, sisters, 2 friends and I set up as much as we can for the next day. My mom calls at 1 p.m. and says they will arrive closer to 3 p.m. As the hours go by I wonder where my family is: mom, grandmother, aunt, uncle, and 2 cousins. We arrive at the rehearsal dinner by 5:30 p.m. My father-in-law hosted it at their house. He spent hours and hours making his Italian grandmother's meatball and spaghetti recipe he only makes in very special occasions. My sisters and I get there around 5 with no word from my mom. We call but it goes straight to voicemail. The road is treacherous with little to no cell reception. My sisters and I are freaking out. My husband is calling highway patrol, we are calling hospitals but to no avail. My mom calls my sisters at 7-ish and tells them they finally got to the house. Relieved, we go outside to greet them but they aren't there. She amended and said they were almost there. 30 minutes go by and nothing. She later calls and asks me where I am. It turns out they set their GPS to the Airbnb house we were all staying at for the weekend. Not at my in-laws. The house is only 25 minutes away from my in-laws, but my mom says the rest of my family is sick of driving so they don't want to go. I ask her if she is staying, but she said that she isn't dressed and that since I brought the Airbnb key with me she couldn't dress. I told her nobody cared and to just come because my in-laws were just sitting there with pounds of meatballs and empty chairs. She asked my sisters to go wait for her outside and she will pick up the Airbnb key and then come back dressed. My sisters wait outside for 40 minutes waiting for my mom. At this point it is almost 9, and as much as my in-laws tried not to show it, they were definitely upset at getting stood up by my family. My mom calls, she is still outside the Airbnb. I told to just stay there since there was no point since the night was over. I told them they would have to wait until I got there to let them inside. I get there around 11:30 and my uncle is upset at me because they had to wait in the car for 3 hours. I told them I couldn't leave my own party to drop off a key and then come back an hour later. My aunt tells me that this was the worst road trip ever, they were driving for like 13 hours and were so tired. Come to find out, her husband took a shortcut and got them lost without reception. He says nothing. My mom hugs me and tells me sorry, it was not her fault, and that she was mad at my uncle. I honestly was so drained at this point I just wanted to put it behind me. I told her it was okay, and that I was glad they made it okay. Which is true, we were all so worried about them. So now, they are way behind schedule and have no prep work done for the food. My mom asks me what the plan is for tomorrow. I tell her that I have to go super early to set up everything, but that my husband's family will come to help, 5 of them. They told me they would be there as we were saying goodbye after the rehearsal dinner, so they could do the food in the early AM then come help me set up as was the original plan. Day of the wedding comes. My sisters and I get there around 7:30, we start setting everything up. Then my husband and his 2 friends arrive, along with my MIL. We are working on setting up, tent, bar, ceremony, all the DIYs, florals etc. 12 p.m. comes around and I wonder where my family is and where my husband's family is as they are not here yet. I call my mom and she is still making the sides. I ask my MIL if she knows when her family will get here to help. She tells me she told them to take the day to explore the town as she thought my family would be here to help. At this point I am freaking out because there isn't going to be enough time. She is also upset because she is also stressed about the timeline and as I'm yelling directions to my husband and his friends across the tree she asks me where my family is. This is where I accidentally yell at her, they are making the food. I didn't know I was yelling, I didn't know I had any attitude when I said this. I was already freaking out and didn't notice. I was a bit upset at my family and upset that nobody told me there was a change of plans with who was coming to help. My husband comes to me a few minutes later and tells me that I need to apologize to my MIL. I said, for what? He said, for yelling at her. I said, I didn't yell at her. I did though. And I didn't even know it. I am a very non-confrontational person so filled with dread I went to talk to her. She was very upset with me. She told me she felt very taken advantage of, huge piece of info, they paid for the wedding, about 6K, they also gifted us another 5K for our honeymoon, we are so incredibly grateful and know that it would all not have been possible without them, and that as the mother of the groom she should be at home relaxing and not having to set up. I told her that I was really sorry about yelling at her and that I was just freaking out about the time. She said that my family should be there helping me and that since she and my FIL paid for the wedding she told her family to go enjoy themselves. At this point I'm crying. I'm saying sorry and that she was right, and that I was just really stressed and I had just been confused. I then continue setting up, all the while crying my eyes out. My husband sees me and tries to console me as I'm sobbing. He goes to tell my MIL to apologize to me for making me cry, so she comes and tells me there's no reason to cry and that she is over it. I apologize again and she leaves. At this point, I call my mom and ask her where she is at because it is 1 p.m., the wedding is at 3 and she is the only one who knows how to set up the sound system she brought and the arch we're getting married under. As I'm leaving to go get ready they are finally on their way to the venue. I have about 40 minutes to get ready for my wedding. I shower, rush to put on my makeup while my sister does my hair. As I finish getting as ready as I'm going to get, my sister tells me my mom is almost done and about to leave the venue to get dressed. At 2:50 p.m. I wait as much as I can but my mom isn't coming. At this point it's 3:20, I'm trying my hardest not to cry in my mediocre makeup lol. And realize my grandmother isn't ready either, even though she was in the house with us, she helped me do some last-minute repairs to my veil, and I asked her why she wasn't ready as I was walking out the front door. I have never ever even raised my voice at my grandmother, but that day I must have sounded exasperated. My mother then walks into the house along with everyone else and goes upstairs and asks me if I'm leaving and that they had technical difficulties and that's why they took so long. I lost it. I yell, "Oh my fucking godmother." The horrible part is that my grandmother doesn't speak English and she was next to me so she must have thought I was yelling at all of them. I run out the door sobbing and basically having a panic attack. I thought that after all this my mother wasn't even going to get to see me get married anyways as they wouldn't make it and we were already going to get there almost an hour late. My sister helped calm me down and as I turn on the car my mother gets in the car. She was able to put on her dress in record time. We get there, and it was absolutely beautiful. My vision come to life. I got to marry my best friend and I could not believe how lucky I was to be married to him. Time for portraits came. My mom asked to go first because they needed to go back to get the food. They came back an hour and a half later. I thought that was it, but no. The food was cold because my mom thought the chafing dishes would warm it back up. They spent the next 2 hours heating small portions of it in the tiny microwave our Airbnb had. They had accidentally packed up the plates we were going to use, so we had to eat of the plate chargers. The mashed potatoes were concrete and the tri-tip had gone bad and made half the people there sick. Oh, and the sound system she brought would have been great, except the cable that was needed was lost. Thankfully my husband's cousin brought his JBL, thank God for that. All the electronic candles that I had brought to illuminate everything were not put out and instead packed back in a car back at the Airbnb, so it got dark and it was hard to see as people were finishing their meal. As people ate, my husband and I had our first dance. It was only 8 p.m. and everyone was already picking up and leaving. All I could do was look at everyone picking up chairs and trash and getting ready to go as I stood there. We cut our cake and just like that our wedding was over. My mother knew I was disappointed, so she got my sisters, aunt, cousins and husband to dance until 10 and then remembered that they only had one car, so they would have to make multiple trips back to the Airbnb. My sisters and cousin offered to wait in my car so Zach and I could go up to our room after we waited with them for a little while. As my mother had to be around the corner at this point, and it was already 12:30, we agreed and went up to the treehouse. An hour later my sister calls me and says she is sorry but can she use the restroom because my mom isn't here yet. She comes in and they are shivering and obviously I tell them to wait with us because I'm not letting them back out into the cold car. I had given them the car key to put the heater on, but they didn't. My mother didn't get there until close to 2 a.m. because she got lost. And that was our wedding night. The next day my mother comes to pick up her stuff and is very quiet. After a little she opens up and starts crying because my sister ripped her a new one and told her she disappointed me. I told her that everything was okay, and to not worry about it. She said, "It's so embarrassing, it's a good thing I never have to see these people again. It's been a month and a week, give or take, and I'm feeling a lot better. I haven't reached out to my mom in weeks. My relationship with my in-laws is at an all-time low. We rent their house in our city while they live up north. They told us as we landed on our honeymoon across the country that they had to come to our town and would be staying at our house, that we rent from them. We told them that of course they were welcome but that it was messy as we had just planned a DIY wedding in the midst of being horribly sick and didn't know company was coming. They said okay but then threatened to kick us out when they got there because it was messy and the house sitter had not kept up with some tasks, pool level had gone down, trash was not taken out. As well as some things I hadn't gotten to, cleaned out refrigerator before we left as well as dirty laundry in laundry room and in our room. They have very high standards but they had never reacted like this. My husband says that it's because of the wedding and that they're still mad about how everything went down. Not to mention getting stood up by my family. I felt sad and lonely. I know I just married into a family that used to love me and I was so happy and thankful, but because I wanted my mother to in my life it's now a mess. I know that I could have helped a lot of things to make things go smoother. I do blame myself a lot. I love my husband and am so thankful to be with him. I just wish we would have eloped instead. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe to the channel for more videos like this.